This should be good. Sorry. I think Cox is having problem right now.
Sure.
Just saying. All right. Let's get down to it. Warcraft Logs. So, what can the everyday, casually minded layman do here with Warcraft Logs?
A whole lot.
That's the short of it. Whole lot. Let's look at a couple of things. Sorry, I'm gonna cry because I spilt some milk. So one sec.
I would recommend baseline. The first thing I would do before you even look at your own performance is see as if are you doing what you should be doing in terms of like talent builds and stuff. Like, so I usually go and like before I even start looking at stuff, I see if I'm going against the grain or if I've got the same idea as the people that are doing the best
Great.
in the given.
I love that. So how I'm gonna do that, right? I go up here and I'm gonna click this sucker right here. This is the 3 bars, 1, 2, 3, and it pulls down essentially all of the raids and that they have been logging, so you can find all of the material that you need to. And in this case, we're looking at Eternal Palace, right? So I go by boss by boss. Do you do anything different?
No, I usually go by boss as well.
So cool. So I'm gonna go look at Abyssal Commander Savara. I'm gonna check rankings. Yes.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And here we are on the rankings. So you can see this is everybody on mythic difficulty, all regions, all classes. I know I'm a heroic raider, so the first thing I do is I switch it to heroic. And you can see, like, look at this insanity. This demon hunter at eye level 436 nailed the boss at 56,000 DPS. It was a 2-minute fight, however, so that's like literally a third of the fight is during lust, and maybe 100% of the fight is under certain potions. I mean, depends on what you're using, but so I'm gonna look at all classes because I'm looking at my own priests, shadow, and here's what I usually do. Um, Kahs can jump in and adapt. So the number one shadow priest on this fight at eye level 427 is using the following talents: Shadow Word Void. That's what I do. Twist of Fate. Yep, that's what I do. These are all utility stuff, so it doesn't really matter. This person's using Auspicious Spirits, which is really interesting because I don't. Lingering Insanity and Surrender to Madness. This sounds like some cheese shenanigans, to be honest. I bet there will be some Surrender to Madness going on in here because you get to, if you have a 2-minute fight or whatever, you get half of it doing lots of damage. That's pretty amazing. I might try that for fun. Otherwise, you can also see what Azerite traits they have, what trinkets they're running. They're using the compendium and the computation device. This looks like some cheese stuff because they have a lower eye level um, as well, but they're doing a ton of damage, which is really interesting. Sometimes if you're looking and you're like, but these people are way above my eye level or whatever, sometimes I will go and actually search within my own bracket. Let's say I'm 425, 426 equipped. I can go there and still get an idea of like, these people are at my level. Why am I not performing as well as they are? In this case, this person is having short fights, much shorter than ours. This one's much longer, but they're still doing a ton of damage. So I can kind of get an idea of like what's going on here. They've got good trait distribution. I'm missing one Spiteful Apparitions. I know that for sure. They are using different trinkets than me, so I can get an idea of what's going on here. Looks like the eye level's broken here. Is that always true?
Um, Not necessarily. Oh, you like? Are you talking like the trinkets or whatever?
Yeah,
Those just are default. Yeah, you have to actually click on them and pull up the log. That's not that it's broken. That's just that it'll always like default to 400 for some reason.
got it. So I might want to look at this person who's eye level 400. They did 45,000 damage. I can click on their name and it pulls up their log, which we can look at here in a minute.
Sometimes if you're looking at the higher eye levels, you'll see their damage and stuff, but then it'll be private, so you won't be able to do.
Right, that's true. So in this case, though, there's so many buttons, there's so many buttons. I think ultimately, one of the most useful things is to go, okay, let me see what good people are actually using.
Well, yeah, I would continue with what you're doing though, because what you're doing can be really useful. So click on that.
hmm So damage done.
Yeah, but actually click on them specifically, like on their name.
Oops, I thought I did. So,
Boom. Now you can see how many casts they're getting in, what their spells are, and if you go to summary, you can see more specifically the eye levels of their trinkets and all.
yeah, you can check them out. Um, Looks like pretty good distribution. I could compare this with my own log, pull it up, and kind of see how I'm doing. For instance, why don't I do that? I'll go pull that up. Um, I think I should be able to open this in a new, no, because it always wants to pull up Mercutio. That's like what the cookies remember for some reason. So I can look at my best Shivara here at 75. Really? Oh my gosh, that's not what I wanted. Excuse me, everyone. Shivara. So it's a minute longer for us. Damage done. Here's Djii. Boom. Okay, I'm gonna do a little bit of this. I don't know what this will do to the stream.
You're only getting one window.
Yeah, I figured.
Oh, maybe
Looks like one.
one window, just half a screen.
I'll flip back and forth then. Oop. Okay, there we go. So I see this person. He's got 84 casts. Most of their damage, 18.44% of their damage is from void bolts. Or of my damage is from void bolts. 17.94 damage of their fight is from void bolts. I have more casts of void bolt than they do because my fight is longer for sure. So I can go back and forth and kind of get an idea of, okay, why am I not doing as well as they are? I don't have nearly as many casts of Shadowward Void going for how long the fight goes, so I must be screwing something up there. I don't have nearly as many shadowy apparition damage isn't up there, but that's because I don't have a trait, so I can kind of figure out what's going on by going back and forth here. Sometimes, if you're really crazy, I will actually go and check out their like cast order. I can check out like specific events, I believe is it, where I can see each ability that they cast. So this is as the looks like they're pulling with Void Eruption, immediately casting Shadowward Void using a potion. They're getting right into it here with Void Bolts, Shadowward Pain, so I can kind of look to see exactly what they're doing second by second. That might be a little in depth, but sometimes that helps me to
Yeah,
know
I don't
what they're
usually
doing.
look at that so much. Like I'll just look at their distribution because, like, again, just the way the Sims, where you look at
hmm
how did the damage play out? Like, was my most damaging spell my Chaos Bolts, or was it my Infernal, or was it Incinerate? You can look at them and compare. Like, if we're running the same talents and using the same Azerite, does our damage distribution look the same, or is something massively skewed? And why is that?
Right,
And why did it benefit that person versus like me doing less damage?
right, exactly. So the question is like, yeah, could I potentially get up to this person's levels of DPS? Maybe, potentially. This has got to be Cyclotronic Blast. Yeah, it is. So dumb. Maybe potentially, but I want to figure out how I can do that. So you can kind of look to see that for sure. Yeah, they are doing like a sustained amount of like above 60k here for a long time. I wonder, gives me thoughts. Conch Strike. That's the physical damage, right? Tidal Droplet.
Maybe.
This is benthic. This is benthic. This is benthic. So they got three benthic pieces. Oh, let's see, where's summary at? I think it is. So you can look at their loadout. Yep. They've got the belt to do the physical damage. They've got the feet to do increased critical strikes. Oh man, that's brutal. They've got the wrists to do the frost damage, and they've got the hands to do the frost damage. It's benthic, man. Look at all that benthic.
Oh, he's got a lure too.
He's got a lure as well. Crazy.
What a jerk! RNG favored him.
And look at this. He's got this mantle. So he's got all of the right pieces. I wonder how big his crits are hitting for. So average cast hits crit percentage. So he's got a 40%, 46% crit rate. He's got like 50% crit rates on most of his top damaging abilities, which is amazing. Um, I mean, that's what Chorus of Insanity does for sure. Helps with that, but um, wondering how much more damage his Void Bolts are doing than mine on average. Average cast is 25k, right? See, my average casts are 21.4k, so he's doing more damage, and I wonder if it's that increased crit. Because, like, I'm only 31% chance crit, 38. I need more crit. I need to manage my void stacks better, is probably the truth. I'm very interested now. I know this is just like maybe much more personal on stream, but this is the kind of thing you can accomplish. Um, trying to figure out what's going on. So I want to see how many, I should be able to see stacks, right, of void form.
Theoretically,
Uh, void form.
because that's a buff, right?
Yeah,
You might be able to track it on the buff.
I'll do that. It's better. Buffs, so Memory of Lucid Dreams, used it twice, seems right. Void form, 210 total stacks of void form. This should be interesting. Look at this long void form at the beginning. You see that? 87% of his time is spent in void form. 78% of time is spent in void form for me. I choked it on this, and I had
Yeah, you get
250
more
stacks.
stacks, but you were on double the duration of the fight or whatever.
Not
His,
quite double.
his
I'm
was a
only a
twos,
minute.
ours was 5.
This is a 4-minute fight I picked. Yeah, 4-minute, and ours is 5:15. So you can see my void forms are a little bit smaller. What does teach me mean? I'm scared to teach
Click
him.
it, find out.
To educate. Oh, it's to teach the logs. Get out of here. I don't want to teach you. So you can see my void forms are probably shorter than his, which means I'm not getting as many stacks. Like he's got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and a short sixth for 210 stacks of void form. I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 for only 250 stacks of void form. So he's averaging higher stacks of void form, which are going to make more crit for him um, when he drops out of void form. So that's why he's doing it. That's why it's working. So now I've just learned something. I'm going to figure out how to get better stacks of void form. Figure out how to stay in void form better. That's what you get to do. Um, I'd say something that's useful here. We post our logs always. We've got our Stormforged reports here, and you can always click on the most recent one if you just want to go get a look at what's going on. This was the Queen of
Look at
Shara.
those. Those
Woo,
aren't good
woo,
logs.
woo. Right, and so what's useful about logs of incomplete fights at least is that, as a raid lead or even as yourself, you can go, what was going on? Why was I dying? What is happening here? You can like check into, certain things like Zilly died, what happened his last 3 hits. We can get some ideas there, or really start to look at like interrupts, like who's actually handling interrupts, who's doing what they need to do. In a crazy world, you can actually rewatch the fight with a replay, um, which has helped me to like look at positioning to know like, oh man, I really thought I was there, but like I
Who wiped
sh
the raid because they didn't know their colors on
right.
May?
Oh yeah, we definitely used it on that, but you can actually, you know, play the fight in real time, and you can kind of see what's going on. Here's Yorick running around. He's got Moon on his head as he always does. Everybody else who's entered the fight, and you can keep track of active like damage done. You can look at specifically. I love this feature because it really helps me to know like where am I? Am I screwing this up? Am I in the wrong place? Are people calling things like here go the tanks separating out these bosses? So you can really get a good idea. You can look at one person like here's Kaz. We can see Kaz's active kind of damage situation of what's going on here. I can see his health. Can see his buffs, uptimes, things like that. Can see Corinne, we can look at libidos, we can look at period, but you can use that to your heart's content if you think it might be useful. I like it sometimes. Um, but like incomplete fights, that's where we can start to look at okay, what's actually going on. Um, and again, what Kaz pointed out in the first place was like looking at people's incom or complete fights at Queen Ashara at our level. That helps me know like, are we capable of doing this? Yes, we're absolutely capable of doing this.
Well, and I often like the first couple of weeks, I'll theory craft in my brain. I'll look at a fight and I'll go, okay, this is a multi-target fight, so I think it's probably going to be best for absolute corruption. I'm going to blah 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 blah. Guesstimate what I think are going to be the best talents, and then usually I go back and I look, and sometimes I'm spot on, and I've been running the right stuff, and then sometimes you look and like the top 30 people are not running the talents you're running. You're like, okay, well, I guess because of X, Y, or Z that I didn't think about, this performs better. And so then you actually can end up swapping out your talents and improving like your build or whatever.
Right. Um, that's helpful. Otherwise, like, I always like to go look after, I raid night and go, okay, how did I do? Here's the summary of how everyone does. I go check damage done to see, okay, I did pretty well. You can check your parse percentage, which, it gives a good idea of kind of where you're performing along everybody else. 68% means that I am what better than 68% of shadow priests that have logged. Is that true?
Correct.
Great. Um, so that gives you an idea. Eye level percentage, I think, is helpful in the case where you are, I mean, it's only as big as the sample size. So, for instance, Potato's a little bit lower on the eye level scale, and you can see he's a 66 overall. That means all enhancement shamans are, he's better than 66% of them, and at his eye level, at 420, for all of the logs of 420 enhancement shamans, he's better than 90% of them, which gives
Yeah,
you a
but you can look at that and you can go, okay, maybe he's just being held back by gear. It's not
yeah,
performance.
exactly, exactly. Sometimes those get wonky just because of sample
Yeah, I'd say
size.
the flip
Yeah.
side, you like look at my sample. This is not a great one, but I don't know how many times I've been like, I'll have like a 90 parse, and then my eye level parse is like 60. And the reason is because a lot of times I'm usually one of the highest eye level people in the raid. And so as I outpace the raid item level wise, the people I'm competing with are mythic raiders that are doing reclears. And so their fights are 3, 4, 5 minutes shorter than ours. And
Right.
so my parse is going to look bad compared to them because I'm competing with the highest of the eye level people. As where like if you're within our raids average in terms of eye levels and stuff, then it's probably going to be a little bit more accurate.
Yeah.
So, and on the flip side, again, if you're a low item level, and we're performing well as a raid, then you're probably going to have a much higher item level parse just because our raid is performing better than where those people are likely getting their parses from. So
Yeah.
it's good, but be careful of fringe cases because
Yeah.
it can kind of lie to you.
For instance, looking at Thoradin here, like we got an eye level of 410, which is uh pretty low. I mean,
Pretty
yeah,
low.
it's pretty
He
low.
got a lot of gear though, so he's a lot better than that.
Yeah, he did. But the point I'm trying to make here is that, like, 17% of his parses, this is compared against 22,000 parses made for Retribution Paladins. So out of those 22,000 parses, he's better than 17% of those. His eye level, however, wow, he's got a 65%. That's above average. That's looking great. Bear in mind, that's 235 parses at that level in Heroic on this boss. So 200 parses versus 22,000 sample size, you know, ideally, yeah, that would still, transfer as he gets up to 25 or 26 or,
Yeah,
or
assuming he can
27.
maintain that level of performance. So if he's performing at a 65% level or whatever of the maximum capacity, assuming that the number one parse at item level 410 is like performing really well, they just have crap gear,
Hmm.
then like as their gear increases, then their damage is obviously going to exponentially increase, which is great. Or
Right,
not exponentially, I guess linearly
right.
increase, but
Yeah.
you'll see market growth.
Yes, absolutely. So that's something to kind of keep track of, and that can be nice, especially if you're like coming back from a break or something, and you're like, oh man, and you can see that maybe I am doing a little better than I thought, but still,
Also interesting to note, sometimes if you're looking at specific eye level parses, it can be a little skewed too, because a lot of times, like for instance, I will run like I've got a really bad chest Azrite wise. It's 445 because I rolled on it, but it rolled like the worst possible traits for me. So it boosts my overall item level, but it has by no means the best traits on it. So if I had opted to do to stick with my 420 chest or whatever that I had before, then my eye level overall would be lower, but my traits would be better. I'd be doing slightly less damage overall, so that's why I opt to equip the 445. But the value, I guess, of the eye level is hurt pretty bad by me having a higher item level. So slight, like it ends up being like 100 DPS higher. So I take it because I want every bit of DPS. But if I had the equivalent piece that was actually 445, then I'd be doing maybe 500 or 600 DPS more, and then that makes a difference in the parts too. So
right, right. So, take eye level with a grain of salt, but it does at least help you
it
go.
paints some
Right,
picture, so
right,
it gives you some idea.
right. Just should be should be considered there for sure.
Yeah, as with all things, it gives you a snapshot of how you're doing compared to others, and as long as you know how to interpret that data, it can certainly be used to help you improve.
Hmm. So, a couple of things here. Gonna try this. Is this working?
Are we moving away from logs?
In a second.
So I was gonna say I've got one more thing that I would bring up on logs,
What do you think?
but if you've still got something else,
No.
I'd say so. Go back over to the top left there, click on your little three bars,
Okay.
go to Eternal Palace, but go to Statistics.
Ooh, this is good stuff.
Now change it from Mythic to Heroic because that's what we're doing. And I like to use 90th percentile because I want to be looking at the top 10% of players to get a feel for classes.
And right now, it's the default is 75%.
Correct. Yeah. So if you're sitting there and I'm wondering to myself, what spec should I be playing as a warlock? I'll look at this after a few weeks. I thought destruction was going to be really good. I played destruction the first week that we ran the raid because it was simming better than affliction. But because of the amount of movement and stuff that's required in these fights, you can see that destruction is the worst spec in the game across all bosses average at heroic right now. So I'm playing affliction, which is the third best across all specs in the game. So if you're willing to swap between specs and you want to know what's performing well, or you're trying to see how your particular class stacks up against others, this is useful to look at and give you a snapshot. So like if I was coaching a new warlock and they're like, what should I play in raid? Just show them this screenshot, and the answer is absolutely clear. Affliction is the way to go if you don't want to be swapping between bosses because it crushes demonology and destruction overall.
Right. For the level that we raid, technically, I'll say this, everything is viable.
Everything's
However,
viable, but if you're
however,
looking at min
yeah,
max,
exactly. If you're like, "Oh, I don't really care which, kind of warlock I play, this is where you can get an idea of like what's actually working and what's not. So Shadow Priest right
or
now
if
is
you find
working.
yourself like poopy and you're like, man, I'm just not performing. You're like, why am I always low on the meters? I feel like I'm doing really well and I'm doing my rotation. Take a look at this because you may be parsing 90th percentile, but
Right,
if I'm also parsing 90th percentile and you're playing destruction, I'm playing affliction, you can just look at this chart and this tells you why I'm crushing you on the meters
right,
because your spec simply isn't performing at the same level as mine.
right. A good kind of indicator of that is period does really good. He's got some good parses, but like his class is kind of middle of the road generally. And so like Kaz will parse lower than him and do more damage, whereas period will parse higher than him and do significantly less damage. And it's
Yeah, there
just
was one fight that I think we parsed the same, and I beat him by 10k DPS
right,
just because Affliction just simply does better in raid than
right,
Frost.
right. And ultimately, like all I'm hoping for as a raid lead is that, you are good at your class, that you are, you know, above average in what you have chosen to do, that you know what's going on there for sure. Other than that,
And that's why we ask for you to parse well,
yeah,
not necessarily. We don't say you must do 25k DPS minimum to get into the raid. Instead, we
yeah.
say we're looking for above 50% parse because if you really enjoy playing a class that isn't necessarily performing as well, but you're playing it well, we're willing to work with that as where you could choose to play Shadow Priest, but if you're a shit Shadow Priest, like it doesn't really matter because like even if your class is super strong, if you're not performing, we don't really
Ooh,
want you in raid. We
I'm
want people to
feeling
care.
attacked right now.
I chose Shadow Priest because it's the top parsing by a significant amount. If you look at that,
I know it really is. And so I actually average around 56%. So if I go down to 50th, I'm still still at the top of
yeah.
the
So if
fight.
we're all average players, you should be number one in our raid
I should.
based on.
I'll
But we're not average players.
we're above average
We're
players.
slightly above.
Right. Ideally, so currently, here I'll show you my so everyone knows. Don't look at the rest of my drive.
Fallout mod,
Oh yeah.
fantasy ground.
Okay, here's the raid roster. I still have to add Libby on here. Um, but our DPS average right now is at a 57, sorry, 58.18. Ideally, we'd be in the mid 60s. That's where I'd like to be as a guild.
But our requirement, and I don't know if we're changing it, but it has always been stated we
Yes,
want everyone to be
yeah,
parsing above
above
50 is your
above
goal. Above
50% as we head into the next tiers, especially that'll be like your ticket into progression, um, just to handle that. But as you can see, like for instance, Akio has some good parses here, but he also like choked on Zakul. He still has
he probably died early or something and got
mhm,
an 8% parse because,
right, for
and
instance.
we've only killed him like twice. So
Right, even Djii here, like I've got some decent parses and then some like kind of crappy ones, but it still averages above, above average, and that's the hope. Like you can have a sucky fight that you hate, that's fine. It happens sometimes, but
yeah, and a lot of times too, like it's not the end all be all. We don't just straight bench people for being below 50. Like
no, no, no,
I
no.
remember in what Tumas Argeris or whatever, I
Hmm.
think you and I were consistently the lowest parsing like
Yeah,
overall on that because we were the mechanics bitches
right,
on a couple of
exactly,
fights. And it was like
exactly,
we're gonna take a DPS hit because people aren't doing the mechanics, and if
right.
nobody does them, we don't kill the boss. So
Hmm.
if that's the case, if you're doing soaks and immunities or you're running around doing interrupts and stuff
Yeah,
or
you're
taking care of
you're doing
ads,
your job. Yeah,
then yeah, you're helping us contribute to the kill. So we'll factor that in. So if you have a bad fight because of that, whatever, we understand that. But
right,
overall, your goal should be to be shooting for that 50% marker on all fights.
right. Anyone curious, the eye level here I just pull off of what you last probably logged out of. And so I know that fluctuates from time to time, but it gives an idea of what you're actually wearing. So you might see your,
If you want to update mine, I'm 430 equipped in affliction gear now.
oh, yuck. Look, you're going to turn orange. Oh, not quite. You have to be, oh, yeah, there it goes. There you go. You're looking pretty orange there. I have to update this for this week, but it gives us an idea here. I'm always looking at averages and trying to keep the rate up to snuff because we're good. Um, so the other thing I was going to point out here is that you have a log and you're like, I don't know what to look at. I'm not exactly sure how I'm going to help myself here. Do reach out to like period. Do reach out to me. Do reach out to Kaz. Um, uh, I think other people would be willing to help you as well for sure. But I know that we spend our time looking at logs and interpreting them. Another thing you can
The
do.
first couple of weeks, I probably spend as much time simming for raids as I actually do raiding.
Exactly. Yeah. And you may not have that time and that's fine, but it's amazing what knowledge can do. Knowledge is power, so you have an idea of just like an awareness. It's like your bank account, you know what I mean? Like you have to check your bank account sometimes or you will, just go through life being like, "Oh, well, I'm doing fine. I'm just spending everything, it's great." And then you check your bank account and you're like, "Oh my gosh, I actually suck." Like, maybe that's not a good metaphor, but it's
That's
like
too real. You're you're
I know,
you're
I know.
getting too
Well,
real.
I'm pulling from real life. I'm pulling from real life too. But it's the same thing where it's like you got to know where you're at, so you can kind of figure out where you're going and try to plan a course to get better. But if you have a log and you're like, what's going on here? An idea, obviously we have in our Discord server here. Oh, look at this. Period. Oh, that's funny. So in our Discord server here, as we've always had in useful links, Kaz has found the class Discord servers that you can go to.
I honestly haven't checked those links in a while, so if any of them are broken, let me know and I'll
Oh
get you an
yes,
updated one. But
please.
I
But
don't think many of them have changed because I think those are kind of the community
I
headquarters and a
think
lot.
so. I have the Warcraft Priest, Hammer of Wrath, Dream Grove, True Shot Lodge that I'm a part of because those are classes I was playing. But you can check those
Call it the
out.
Dovahkiin or whatever down at the bottom.
Oh yeah, there it is. I got lots of servers going on here, but people in like at least in the Shadow Priest community, and I know that a lot of other communities that are really good. Uh, you can jump in there, find the right channels, and you can be like, hey, I'm looking for some help here. Here's a link to my log. Can someone help me? And chances are, I mean, obviously you want to check read first or any announcements or any kind of policies and community rules and stuff. But like, Shadow has great resources, updated FAQs, talent lists, benthic stuff. Lots of people that are always online that can give you answer specific questions, that can answer questions about your logs and things like that. May feel like daunting or whatever, but you're one person in a thousand, a million at any time. Um, but it's actually kind of fun too because you get to know people. You're just like, wow, I know this Shadow Priest, they're good. So um, that's happened once or twice. Um, so for instance, like I'm just reading something right here from Ellipsis Ice Bear. So this person has Thought Harvester on, which is doing nothing for single target, which can be great. Somebody's going to be able to point something out and go, um, you need to look at these traits. You need to do this differently.
The haste cap
Yeah,
meme.
did you see that? Isn't this good? So there's good stuff. There's good stuff to be found in those channels for sure. Um, to help identify
Yeah,
that.
Warlock's got a really good community and they've got their own website. I think you've got How to Priest.
Uh-huh.
Warlocks have the Warlock One Stop
Mhm.
Shop or whatever. And
Mhm.
a lot of the stuff starts in the Discord. And then as conversation and theory crafting and stuff evolves there, eventually it finds itself onto the website.
Yes. Yep. Eventually that's how
But
it goes,
most
but
of the real time theory crafting takes place in the Discord because the
mhm.
websites require updates, as where Discords are literally just communications amongst people that have
Yes.
like a similar.
Happening right away. Yeah, 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 for sure. Um and that's where I go. Like when I'm like something's not right. I've definitely gotten a lot better. When we were doing KJ, for instance, in Legion at the end of Tomb, um, I just was sucking. Shadow Priest was hard on that fight, first of all. But then we were just up against these DPS checks, and I would like just couldn't figure out what I was supposed to be doing. And I got into the Discord, and that guy Ellipsis, actually, Ice Bear, had a really great suggestion as far as the rotation for that fight and what to plan for and what to think ahead on. And then I went into LFR and I'd practice it, or I'd, for the next couple weeks, and it just massively improved things because they see the class in a different way than you do. They know where the damage is really coming from, and so that they can help you kind of understand that and realize that. So,
I will say though, a lot of those communities, if you go in there and you ask a question like, "What's better for me, lure or shiver?" the response you're immediately going to get is, "I don't know. Have you simmed it?"
yeah, that's true.
So the
Hunter
beginning of this
discords.
thing is very much a
Yeah.
is very much because like it's good to discuss theory crafting and try to figure stuff out and be like, hey, they both sim similar, but in terms of execution, blah blah blah. But if you're just simply asking what's the best gear I should have, they expect you to have a certain degree of understanding about
Yeah.
the class and how to sim and stuff like that in those
Right,
kinds
for
of
sure.
communities.
So don't get offended if you come in with some like seriously newbie questions like that, because you can find some of that out for yourself. You can definitely find it on. We've also linked some guides and other Discord servers and things, or not guides, but other Discord servers. You can look up guides. Is what I'm trying to say. Jeez, look up guides that sometimes talk specifically about Azerite trades because they are written many times by people who are in the Discord servers handling this stuff. Um, so you wanna make sure you're kind of up to code there, not asking obvious questions that may
Yeah, yeah,
even
yeah.
be included in an FAQ. For instance,
Yes.
I have an FAQ right here, and it tells me a couple things about 8.2. For instance, here's a little recap of what we got nerfed on, what rating traits should still look like, what talents should still look like, what essences are still looking good, benthic gears, and then talent breakdowns, which is interesting to me. Though this swapping between Shadow Crash and Auspicious Spirits, but there's a note here that we can use both of them. So make sure you do your due diligence, and that's kind of the name of the game. Is people will help you, but they can't walk you hand in hand from beginning to end. You know what I mean? On that note, here's another thing. So Blood Mallet might be a good just like go to, check it out, get an idea. I don't know how well Blood Mallet actually works for Shadow Priest because I know the Shadow Priest theory crafters are extremely serious and diligent about the way they sim. They sim in 100 different ways. I mean, by 100, I mean like literally thousands and thousands of ways. So it's really, really crazy. But you can check here, like here's Shadow Priest. I can check trinkets out at various eye levels to get an idea. So in this case, Blood Mallet says that Leviathan's Lure is going to be like my best in slot at 445.
for a patchwork.
Yeah, for patchwork. Yeah, you could change Hectic Ad Cleave. So they've done some sims in this. It's just kind of an at a glance. Some of these are modified by other stats and things. Check essences, one single essence or combination of essences. This is wild. This is new. I haven't never seen this, but this is absolutely crazy. Either way, it can be helpful to
But bear in mind, those are super useful, but remember that that's using a stock build,
right,
not your build.
right,
So I like Blood Mallet as a starting point when I'm running my top gear
right,
because I'll look at this and I'll say, hey, it's saying Shiver's really good, Leviathan Lore is really good, Compendium's really good. So let's run with my gear because my stat weights may be different than whatever their default thing is there. And as a result, perhaps Compendium passes Lore slightly or passes Shiver slightly in any given fight. So like it's a really great starting point if you're trying to narrow down the the field or whatever when we're talking about the number of iterations and stuff. If you just like as a general rule of thumb, what is the best? These are the best in terms of Azerite traits, essences, blah, 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 blah.
right.
But for you personally, it could always vary because no two warlocks are the same, which probably
Exactly.
isn't true. I bet there are somebody that's wearing the exact same gear as me, but you get the point.
Yeah. So for instance, like my class has their own kind of sims that are much more in depth and let you switch between different options and that you can see all kinds of stuff. So it's impressive. Don't get used to this though, because not every community is this in depth. This is definitely some Shadow Priest shenanigans right here, but um, gives you an idea. But always, name of the game, sim yourself. Sim yourself.
Yeah, at the end of the day, the only way you can figure out what's the best is to sim yourself. And even then, sometimes you have to feel craft because, like we said, the sims don't tell the full picture in terms
Right,
of movement and stuff like that.
right. You might discover that, the sim says that this is better, but I'm not using it properly, and so maybe I could use this one to get more damage out of it, or the fight doesn't allow for this kind of trinket.
Or like
Uh,
Zakul, when he does the little soak thing, he takes 30% increased damage. So even though a flat sim tells you like in a hectic ad cleave fight, X, Y, or Z talent may be good, if a different talent allows you to line up CDs with those big burst windows on that particular fight, you may be able to outperform a sim because the fight dictates burst windows that don't line up with your best simming gear because it doesn't know that you're fighting Zakul. It just puts a generic boss in.
right. So ultimately, I'd say the three kind of main takeaways here today would be simming, use top gear, get an idea of where you're actually uh, where your potential could be on certain fight styles or on a target dummy to practice. Use WoWAnalyzer for kind of an at a glance look at what I'm doing well, what I'm not doing well, what I could be working on, and then Warcraft Logs to give you an idea to compare yourself with other people who are playing your class who may be performing better than you to get an idea of what am I missing. At any point, if you
Yeah.
need help looking at that stuff, I think Kaz is open to it. I'm open to it. Period's open to it. We can help you uh, sim yourself and
Yeah, there's a ton of
have fun.
resources out there, and you can invest a huge amount of time into improving your game without actually playing the game.
Right.
But at the end of the day, I think if this is like daunting and overwhelming, you're like, oh my god, I don't have enough time to do all that. Biggest thing you could do, just with the gear that you have right now, go back to the beginning of this stream or whatever, and just run a top gear sim. Just run some of the things and just see, are you equipping the gear that theoretically is going to perform the best in a given situation? Because little things like that may be the difference. Um, you can do the same thing with talents. Maybe if you've got the best gear on now, sim the talents and see if the talents you're using are the best.
Yep.
And then, take just a quick glance at Warcraft logs and see, are the talents you're using on any given fight the same as the highest performing people in your class for that fight? Because you can see there's always outliers and there's always ways to make it work. Like you saw that one Shadow Priest that was using Surrender to Madness. So there's a way to make it work. But as a general rule, most everyone was not using that talent.
Right.
So unless you know the way to make Surrender work there, you're probably better off using what everybody else does.
Mm-hmm. Because I don't know how to make it work. Cool. Well, I will probably be downloading these and chopping them up a little bit, or at least getting some time code links in here, because I understand Kaz and I talk a lot in general. We are chatty Cathys, but
This is a pretty detailed conversation. There's a lot to go into
yeah,
it. So the honest to God solution, if you don't get this, just ask us. We'll sit
yeah,
down with the log with your character.
right,
If you're in our guild, if you're just randomly watching G's YouTube, I don't know if you necessarily want to
yeah, I don't
whisper
know,
us,
yeah, I don't
but
know. I'll be like, who are you? Go away. Um, yeah, but definitely reach out if you need to. We'd rather everybody's doing the best possible work. All right. Cool. I'm going to sign it off here. We are going to potentially on Sunday do a little fishing and talking about the raid. Is that right, Kaz?
sure.
All right, great. So we will see y'all then. See ya.